I'm Mr. Rosansky, and this is a speed run of Practice Test 8, the second module, the B module, the easy one. And let's treat it like every single one and go to the first conventions question. Ooh, I sniped it right at the start. I'm going to check for my omega conventions as per usual. And I see that verbs are popping here. So I'm going to check for number first. I've got a both, a singular, and a singular. I'm going to consider this to be a shifts in verb tense question. So I'm going to consider the whens. Will be is the future. Had is telling me that it's the past. Then I've got the past, and then I've got the present. I'll explore the nuance of be and see if I have to, but I'm going to look for a when clue. And this one's a today. Today is an is, and that's all I have to consider for this one. Conventions, another one. What's going to pop for our omega convention? Maybe, and it's verbs again. I've got a number first, singular, a both, a singular, and a neither. I'm going to bias the odd man out and go looking for a reason in the historical context. Uses poetry rather than prose. You're going to read this and just try your vibes first, which would probably lead you to this, but I'll explain why just so we push for excellence because we've got the time for it. Uses is a verb that tells me when. I can't have two verbs that tell me one in one clause unless I have a coordinated conjunction linking them. So it's going to be one of these two because told does tell me when, but it could also not, and I'm going to ride with to tell. I like plugging in a little in order to help me understand if that's going to be the one that I want. Conventions, omega conventions, let's check for them. I've got verbs, and I love that. I'm going to check for number again first. Singular, plural, plural, plural. Awesome. I'm going to bias the odd man out, thinking this is a subject-verb agreement question, and go looking for a subject. Prepositional phrase, gerund is a subject, singular to singular. I absolutely love it. Landing allows. Conventions, omega consideration, verbs again. Verbs again. Okay, fine. Singular, neither, both. I can bias the odd man out and go reading the sentence. This is where you're going to be checking your vibes. Once an either pops, you're checking your vibes. I feel that forcing is going to be the right answer, so my vibes were wrong. I'll explain a little bit better. So forces, just like 2 questions ago, I think it was, force is a verb that tells me when. I already have my modality, which satisfies that same concept for my independent clause here. There's a dependent clause here. All of that is just to say that up until this moment, I have a complete sentence. So I can't have another forces. Then a big temptation is going to be between one of these two. This comma ruins the to force, right? I love this comma ing because it's the food sourcing becoming unavailable. Initiates this present participle here. This is the way that it functions. Pick it and move on. Conventions, omega considerations. What do we got? The complete sentence mix up. I've got my lonely coordinated conjunction, my beautiful be, I've got my space, and then I've got my lonely comma. I'll bias the be and I'll go looking for a complete sentence on either side. On the left, I just read it, and I would use a period here. After I read it, I see a subject, its verb is maintained. This chunk here is going to be a dependent clause, but once we have that independent clause, we're kind of in a comfortable position. Then I look to the left side, the right side rather, it left unexplored. I've got another independent clause, subject and verb there, and just for funsies, I'll skim through and see another dependent clause, but that doesn't matter. I have a complete sentence. I need a comma and a coordinating conjunction in order to join those. All the other ones are making a cardinal sin. B gets my pick, and I'll move on. Conventions. We're popping another verb on this one. I've got a both, I've got a singular, I've got a both, and I've got a singular. The presence of these things are going to make me think that this is a shifts in verb tense question, so I'll consider the whens before I look to the left. A is the past, B is the present, C is the past, and then D is the past. So I'm going to hope it's the odd man out, go looking, selling the product. Nothing tells me when here. In addition, isn't a clue other than to tell me to look back one. As I skim backwards, INGs never tell me when. INGs never tell me when. Looking, to repurpose. Infinitives never tell me when. Advised. 1950s. So my clues are the past. So B falls, and then I'm going to dig into the nuance of A, C, and D. So suggested is the simple past in A. Had suggested is the past perfect, and D was suggesting is the past progressive. Remember what I say all the time is you are going to pick the simple aspect unless in the sentence that it's in, you can find some sort of time phrase, some sort of clause, something in that sentence will scream to you to pick one of these. And if you're a native English speaker, approaching it in this way saves you a ton of explicit learning knowledge, and that's what we absolutely love. So I got this suggested because nothing in here is screaming for me to do anything else, so I'm defaulting to the simple past conventions. What do we got? The omega considerations. I think we've got another complete sentence mix-up because I have my lonely coordinating conjunction. I've got my lonely little comma. Whoops, I got my lonely little comma. I've got my space, and I've got my beautiful little choice. But I'm going to check. I look to the left first, and I've got my verb that tells me when right here, and the subject is these consonants on the right side. Boop, beep, boop, beep. I've got my verb that tells me when and its subject here. So I have a complete sentence on either side, and all of these are going to fall. Easy. Logical transition, I will start, oh, geez, simple. First, I'm going to make sure, yeah, wow, what a gift. 3 basic steps, sequence, done. Logical transition again. Read the previous sentence. What have I got? The amendment mandates. It mandates that inaugurations be held on the 20th, 12 weeks after the November. This amendment requires is to mandates. We have 2 clues going on here. Newly elected U.S. senators and representatives to sworn in on January 3rd. All right, I think that I have enough to go on. These feel like different things, but they're not contrasting. It's not like a change of what they were doing. This thing is just doing 2 things. So it's not an instance of the first one or a specific of the first one because this thing is not this thing, but it supports the overall concept of what the ratification of the 20th Amendment did. So in addition, and I love it and I move on, transitions, read the first sentence, screaming sequence at first. The time their critical socialization period began. Wolves can smell. Wolves can smell, but they can't do these things. Then I move on to domesticated dogs, which, as far as I'm concerned, aren't wolves, can see and hear and smell by the end of the 2 weeks. So this doesn't feel sequency. This feels like I'm contrasting wolves and dogs. I'm not restating the previous statement because wolves are not domesticated dogs. I'm not instantiating anything because wolves are not domesticated dogs. By contrast, aligns according, no, this is like a cause and effect. By contrast, we are contrasting these 2 things. Looking in the first sentence, I am going to find something concerned. Resisted calls to televise the court's oral arguments, concerned that participants would be tempted to perform. Participants would be tempted to perform for cameras. Okay. I read the next one. The justices worry that most viewers would not watch the full deliberation. So this is not this thing. However, the justice word, no, these are both negative things. So however isn't going to work here. Those 2 things. And then I also see, okay, however and by comparison, however could present a contrast of concession. So despite the fact that, and that's not the kind of contrast here, then it could just be 2 different things. But I know that even though these are different things, I'd be juggling some weird confusion between A and C for different things. These are different ideas, but it's going to be additionally, because that most viewers would not watch the full deliberations is not that participants would be tempted to perform, but it supports the overarching idea of the court's resistance to televise the appeals. So these 2 ideas support the overarching argument of why they're resisting calls to televise. So even though it's different, we're not going to chase after the difference, and it's not an example of the first because they are different. Logical transition, kind of a juggle there. I can see roughly once an hour, maybe sequence, a torrent of boiling water shoots up, then plunges back to the surface, a cycle seemingly inhospitable to life. So this is like a colon defining how I should interpret this process. As he attests, the geyser is almost like a cradle for biodiversity. This seems to be contrasting that previous thing, that thrive. I absolutely have contrast here. This is cause and effect. The specific thing is not the first one because it's introducing like a contrasting idea. So I'm going to land on still. Still, in this environment, on the SAT, in a transition question, in this environment, just always consider that still is a contrast of concession. We are on our first and only notes question of this test. We want an advantage of the infilling technique. A says to remove carvings from sandstone arches. Power grinding is not, this does not, that we say the -1 or that the other one can't work, doesn't give it a negative of whatever this one would be. Unless infilling is power grinding. We'll check it out. Filling in carvings with ground sandstone and a bonding agent is less invasive. There's my language of an advantage than smoothing them away with a power grinder. Absolutely. I love B. Let's check the others. Park rangers can use power grinding techniques to smooth away carvings or fill them in with ground. This is giving the techniques of both, but it's not giving me an advantage of one. As methods for removing carvings from sandstone, power grinding and infilling differ in their level. This just states that they are equally advantageous almost, so that's going to fall. Let's check to make sure that this one is right. Is filling in carvings with garnet sounded less invasive than? Filling in less invasive than. Filling in infilling. Power can use the infilling technique, which involves filling in carvings with ground and sandstone. The technique is minimally invasive. I love this. My language of advantage is now there, which can greatly. So yeah, so even though it doesn't say straight up infilling, that's not the way that I approach this question. I've eliminated the other ones because they don't do advantage. I've landed on this. I can confirm it with the text, and I feel so good that none of the other ones even explain an advantage. That's going to be the right answer. Let's look for our signal elements and context clues. I don't see anything there. As I skim the next sentence, I don't see anything obvious. I guess it would be the fact that I've got a list as my signal element. They can leave dead prey is going to be one thing. Bring live prey, I guess, will be another thing. And feed their young directly from their own loved mouths is our final thing. Predatory animals differ in how they give food to, and it would just be provided with my answer there. What a weird one. Ooh, this is our bread and butter. Signal element kicks me to it varies in unpredictable ways, so I can go back. Ocean waves is that wave power isn't something that varies, isn't something that varies, isn't stable then would be the cash out as what it be. It is not consistent because it varies in unpredictable ways. We got to do a little reverses there. Being is going to be a signal element to define this thing, but I have to keep reading then was an important part of the process because is going to be my signal element that I'm probably going to use here. He paid close attention. Being someone who pays close attention, being observant would be my answer. Pick it and move on. I am seeing in the immediate environment that I've got a however, which is going to kick me back somewhere here, and an and that'll keep me in the sentence, and will take me to the quickly dismissed. What's the however bringing me? The published letter based on discovered letters allegedly exchanged. However, brought me here. So I've got my two sets of signal elements and context clues. They were not able to, there was this weird little claim, they were not able to validate. Historians weren't able to validate the authenticity of the letters alleged. There was an allegation. However, they couldn't validate and they dismissed. Absolutely. What's the main purpose of the text? I'm going to read the sentence at the end to see what I've got, and then I'll start at the beginning. Correct answers prove the answers were human and added. Correct answers prove the users. Correct answers prove the users were human. The thing worked. The thing worked, I guess, is going to be my final sentence. All right, let's start at the start, noting ideas and signal elements. In 2007, we've got some notion of sequence. It seems to be he was working on something, he found that some words were distorted enough that digital scanners couldn't. He saw a problem, sort of. He saw a problem. Because of this noticing, he invented something for security. So this is the guy that we can thank for all that annoying typing in. Thanks, bud. The first version, this seems to be more advancing of like a sequence. The first version of reCAPTCHA test asks user, the first one did a thing, the thing worked. So this seems to be a loose summary. It felt like sequence. These were things that, I wouldn't go back and do this if I were taking the test. These seem to be presenting like a sequence of events, the first, and I'm going to do all of that to support the culmination of this thing being successful. So let's go to our main idea. It does, we've got sequence, the conclusion that it worked. It does not explain how digital scanners work. We got one sentence that showed that it didn't really work in this way. No, the book digitization project was just a vehicle for reCAPTCHA. And even though I know that it's a popular thing that's everywhere, the language of this, the signal elements are that I just have a process. What's the function of the underlined sentence? Let's read this underlined sentence before we start reading around. Uncle, he was as loud as my father was quiet. He was the opposite of my papa. He was the opposite of my papa seems to be the summary. Let's see if we can fight our fight without looking at anything more, even though there's not much. No, it does not list anything. It suggests that he dislikes meeting new people. Just as he was opposite, but we'll leave it on the table. I love C. It contrasts the two. B falls. It describes a conversation between the narrator and the narrator's father. It does not describe the conversation. It states qualities that contrast between the two. Text 2 about teach. What would text 2 say about text 1? Fine, let's read text 2 first. I'm going to grab the first sentence and work on my summary. They, paleontologists, were excited to discover, were hyped to find a second fossil similar fossil that was like OK, but has the lower part, but the second has the lower body, has part of the lower body, has the lower body and a birdie skull. Whew. Nerds are hyped to find a second fossil that was like OK, but the second, I replay this because I think it wants me to drop that detail. But the second fossil, right? That language there wants me to drop that, but I'm not going to drop that. Detailed studies of both fossils, so we'll move on to the next sentence. Detailed studies of both fossils revealed several traits that are found in lizards but not in dinosaurs. Further research shows both fossils are similar to, or have similar fossils, have some similarities with lizards. Good. Then we can go to the final sentence. So, paleontologists think that the two creatures were probably lizards. So nerds concluded, even though they do be looking like birds, they be lizards. That seems to be a fair understanding of what the text is saying. So I read my summary and I'm going to go to the text. I want to clap back to the researchers' initial thoughts specifically. I don't know where that is, so I'll just start reading. Tiny unusual fossil, they found the OK. So this is about OK. The OK fossil consists of a rounded skull with a thin snout. Okay. Because these features look like they are avian or related to birds, which is what avian means, researchers initially thought, so here's the initial thought, that the fossil might have been the smallest avian dinosaur ever found. So what would they say to this? The researchers in text 1 thought that it was the smallest avian dinosaur ever found. Text 2 would be like, yeah, dog, I know it looks like it, but it's actually a lizard, right? That's what they would say. Yeah, dog, it do be looking like bird, but it's actually a lizard. So I can go to my text with an idea, or the items with an idea. It is understandable. I like that. It's okay, dog, because the fossils look like it could be related to birds, even though it's probably a lizard. I really like that one, but I'm going to keep reading. It is confusing. Text 2 would say, these guys would say it is confusing because it isn't clear what caused the researchers to think. No, they are not dunking on the concept. We had the concession. Even though it do be looking like birds, it's not birds. A still right. It is flawed. It is flawed, true, because the researchers mistakenly assumed that OK must be a lizard. No. Text 2 said it must be a lizard. Text 1, the researchers did not make a mistake. They assumed it was a bird. If that said bird, then I would be in it. It is reasonable, true. It's about the same size as the skull. I don't think text 1 has any idea that second fossil even exists. So the rest of this falls. It's about the same size. The rest of this falls. A is our right answer. What is true about Dorian according to the text? So it's going to be a detailed question, but it's going to be hard because I have this entire narrative. Let's go reading. Dorian passed in front of his picture and turned towards it. When he saw it, he drew back and his cheeks flushed for a moment. With pleasure, a joy came about his eyes as if he recognized for the first time. He stood there motionless and in wonder, dimly conscious that Hallward was speaking to him, but not catching the meaning of his word. The sense of his own beauty came to him like a revelation. He had never felt it before. So this initial reading is just to get a firm understanding of the text, or a loose understanding of the text. We're not going to be summarizing it as we go. We just kind of want to know where to pop to look for these details. He wants to know, I don't remember reading anything about him desiring the person's opinion. I do feel like I know a detail for this. When he saw it, his flushed with pleasure. That would be a detail to support this, and I remember something at the end, but not catching the meaning of the words, his sense of his own beauty. This supports B. I don't remember reading anything about this, and he is uncertain about his talents. No, he seems to love what he saw in the portrait, so he's certain that the guy's got the bars. We've got another according to what is true about Eleanor. So it's going to be the same thing. I'm just going to read this text to get a loose understanding of where certain things can be. So when I come back, I'm faster when I'm coming back. So reading this text, Eleanor, this eldest daughter, whose advice was ineffectual, possessed the strength of understanding, the coolness of judgment, which qualified her, though only 19, to be the counsel of her mother, which enabled her frequent to counteract to the advantage of them all. The eagerness of Miss Dowling was generally be lived and prudent. She had an excellent heart. Her disposition was affectionate, and her feelings were strong, but she had no idea how to govern. It was a knowledge which her mother had yet to learn, and which one of her sisters resolved to never to be taught. Oof, that text is tough. Eleanor often argues with her mother. I think we have that concept loosely here, but fails to change her mind. I don't think I agree with that, but let's look at the next one. Eleanor can be overly sensitive. That's a negative statement, and I disagree with that. This part of the text will refute that. Eleanor thinks her mother to be a bad role model. I like this part of the text for counselor to her mother. I don't have anything to support the fails to change her mind, so I'll make A fall there. C is okay in terms of being supported by this section right here. Then Eleanor's remarkably mature for her age. I do like this one. This one, though only 19, all this awesomeness is from the bounds of this. For picking C, I'd be making a logical leap that isn't according to the text. All I've got is that she's remarkably mature. Why are ecologists worried about Pando? Why are they worried about Pando? Utah's home to Pando, a colony of quaking aspen trees that all share a singular root. It was one of the largest mass, but ecologists are worried. Whew, we found it. Thanks for being a gift. It's going to be right here. That the growth is declining in part because of being grazed by animals. So I read this. It isn't growing at the same rate it used to. Growth is declining. I like that. It isn't producing young trees anymore. That could make growth decline. It says because grazing, I'm going to read a little bit more. The ecologists say that strong fences could prevent deer from eating young trees. Okay, so it's not, there are young trees, it's just that they're getting snacked on. They're not blocked by fences. Fences would be a solution to the problem. I don't know where this would even come from. Oh, I guess the first sentence speaks to that detail, but it's just not growing at the same rate that it used to grow, and that's what the problem is. Let's complete the statement here. My title of the chart, video game availability by initial release years. Okay, complete the statement. For example, it might kick us back one, but let's see if we can do that. Only 14.22% of video games are still available that were initially released in this time period, 1995 to 1999. What am I exemplifying? I just want to make sure I'm getting this right. Researchers found that relatively few video games released over the decades remain available today. For example, only 14. I've got no other option than picking this. No tricks, real names, no gimmicks. At what depths does the southern stoplight loosejaw live? Depths at which 4D species live, so we're just applying the chart. I want to know about the southern stoplight loosejaw, 5,000 to 2,000, 5,000 to 2,000. It's weird. These easy ones, they don't make you read this at all sometimes, but I'm going to read it just in case. Some fish live underwater, researchers, blah, blah, blah. Okay, easy peasy. Whoof! Illustrate the claim. Can you get any bigger, A? My goodness. Illustrate the claim. What's my claim? A deep emotional connection to his surroundings. I'm going to skip A because it's too long. So the first thing I'm going to table is B and C. Alejandra talked to the men about their crops and to the women about their poultry. Deep connection. She spent a whole day with one young farmer who had been away at school and who was experimenting with a new kind of clover head. She learned a great deal. Now, if she was learning a lot, I wouldn't say that this shows a connection. She drove off alone. The rattle of her wagon was lost in the howling of the wind. But her lantern, held firmly between her feet, made a moving point of light along the highway, going deeper and deeper into the dark. Maybe. This might be conveying that she's driven to the country. I like it. I'll pick D now. C or D. It was Alejandra who read the papers and followed the markets and who learned by the mistakes of the neighbor. It was Alejandra. Alexandra. You could tell by that it had cost a fat in each steer. No, this just shows that she's like a responsible businesswoman. Not that she has an emotional connection. I guess C. Let's read A. She had never known before how much the country meant to her. Woo, cringe. It's gonna be A. Sometimes the strats are a little weird, right? That's the way she goes. I know that I'm making a reach that shows this connection. This is showing a deep connection. She had never known how much the country meant to her. The chirping of the insects had been like the sweetest music. This shows the deep emotional connection without a reach. She had felt as if there were no hard hiding there. This is A is the right answer. It's the way she goes sometimes. Is this my last question? Huh. No, logically complete the text. So, data from the table to complete the text. Maximum height of maple trees when fully grown. Based on the characteristics of 5 common maple trees, 5 common maple trees, she has decided to select. She has decided based on the characteristics. Oh, the characteristics. I don't know what qualities, so we'll go back a sentence. A forestry student wants to recommend a maple tree. They're all maple trees that is native to North America and won't grow more than 60 feet in height. The yes or no seems to be an easier thing to fight first. So we want a maple tree that is native to North America, so Japanese and maple die. And we won't grow more than 60 feet in height. Sometimes this greater than or less than more than or equal to can confuse some kids. So we'll start with ones that are obviously not allowed. So sugar, way too big. Silver, way too big. Red maple, on the threshold, at the threshold, below the threshold, and it's got to be it. And that's it. That one was exceptionally easy. GG.